Time now for All Things Gators, All Things Orange and Blue. Back, the season is here. Frank Frangie along with Dan Hicken. What's up, Hick?
I'm doing great. I'm neath the orange and blue victorious. Our love shall never fail. There's no other name so glorious. All hail, Florida. Hail. We're ready
Look
for
at you.
football. And we're thankful to the Southeast Orthopedic Specialists for bringing us this podcast, se-ortho.com, for all your orthopedic needs in the First Coast area. We're balling on Thursday night, and I got lots of questions that I don't know that we'll have answers to until after we see this club for about a month.
You know, I think this is not just for us because we're Florida people, but I think nationally it's one of the most intriguing teams in the country because people don't know.
Yeah.
I think Dan, I think there's the national belief that they're just not very good. And they're picked fifth in the East at the SEC media days and out of the top 25. And one guy, Stuart Mandel, picked him to go 3-9 and 1-7 in the league. You know, so yeah. Billy Napier, I can tell you, I had Billy Napier at SEC Media Days. He's ticked off about that. You can tell he's very annoyed that people think they're going to suck. He thinks they're going to be pretty good. So don't you sense that? Forget us for a second. They're really intriguing because people don't know what to think of the Gators.
I agree. And people around the program definitely see it differently than people who are sort of outside of the program. And I think that's one of the interesting parts about this Florida Gator football team. I know this. History tells me this, and I'm on with Billy Napier. I think everybody who knows him really believes in him, really likes him, really thinks he's going to do a great job at Florida. But history does tell us, Frank, in year two, new coaches take a jump forward. And so I'll be looking for that jump forward. I'm not saying 9 wins. I'm not even saying 8 wins, but I need to see progress. I need to see a better football team than I did a year ago. And I think we will. And I'll start, honestly, on the defensive side of the ball, Frank, where I think that they've finally got some SEC bodies, and it might be a little bit young, but I think that there's a lot of potential there with that group.
Well, the front seven last year, particularly the front four last year, was not very good. One of the worst defensive lines in my lifetime. I've told you that before. So that's got to be better. And I agree with you, Dan. I think the defense will be better on 2 fronts. Number one, more SEC type athletes, like you just said. I agree with that. Young ones. But those 2 transfer tackles are really important. Caleb Banks and Cam Jackson are really important because they're 350, they're 6'6". They've played college football. They're in their 20s. They're really, really important players, man. Chris McClellan's important and Des Watson's important, but the 2 new guys who are probably going to start the game are really important. But I think, and I also think Austin Anderson's going to make a difference. I think he's going to blitz like crazy. I know all we saw was a spring game, but my head's still spinning from all the blitzes in the spring game. So you get the impression that's how they're going to play. So I think 2 things at play for me, at least, Dan. Number one, I think there's 2 big questions about the football team. 2. That's 2. Number one, will the quarterback be efficient? Right? Will the quarterback be efficient? Number 2, will the defense be more physical and fast and better? Aren't those really the 2 questions? The running backs, are pretty good.
Yeah.
The line will be fine. The young receivers will be up and down. The secondary is not bad. It wasn't bad last year. It's the toughness and physicality of the front 7 on defense and how good will the quarterback be. Those are the 2.
I think the answer to the second part, which was your first part at the end of your comment, is I think the answer is resounding yes. The defense will be better, will be tough, will be physical, will be more. I'm not saying they'll be great, but I think they'll be better. I'm intrigued by the kid who won and I like this about Napier, and this was one of the criticisms of the old regime. Best players play. And we got a true freshman in the back end of the defense who has worked his way to the front of the line in Jordan Castell. Is that his name, I believe?
Yeah, that is.
And now look, there are other guys that are going to play, but he has earned the right, according to Billy Napier, to start against Utah on Thursday night on national TV as a true freshman. That doesn't happen a lot around Gainesville. So a tip of the cap to that young man, and tip of the cap to Napier, who, to me, that's a great recruiting tool too. Listen, if you're the best player, we're going to play you. That wasn't always the case with the last couple of groups.
Yeah, as far as Castell goes, my guess is they're all going to play.
Yeah.
You're going to play, you rotate. That's a rotational position. But to start the game, he beat out the transfer from Michigan, R.J. Moten, Ron Moten's kid. He beat out R.J. Moten, who everybody ticketed as a day 1 starter the minute he said he was transferring. Now, look, they're both going to play. But that, to your point, I agree with it, Dan, is the fact that he beat out a guy that's a veteran guy. So they're both going to play a lot. Look, I like what that defense is going to be. I really believe, I'm not saying it's an all-world defense, but last year was so bad. We picked on AR so much, and why is he so inefficient? And why is he not this? And there's a lot of things that weren't perfect about Anthony Richardson. But Dan, they were playing uphill the whole season.
Correct.
It sure would have been nice to have one game where you held the other team to 10 points, so the quarterback didn't have to be. It wasn't always a track meet,
Right.
You were not. I mean, Tennessee and FSU, they almost beat them, but they couldn't keep up at the end of the day in the track meet. So I think that there will be some times when the opponent scores 13, not 43.
Right.
I think, and that's I think the defense will be much better. We'll learn a lot more about them this week.
All right. So an interesting point I heard, and I think it was Greg McElroy who said this, and it was ballied about Graham Mertz. And if you're trying to find some positives with Graham Mertz, Billy Napier believes in him. Kids seem to love him. He's got some leadership qualities about him. But I thought this too. He went to Wisconsin. Now he's a Kansas kid, but Wisconsin treated him as the savior, right? He won the job early, and he had great games out off the rip. And sometimes that pressure that gets to you're 18 years old. And so McElroy's point was the second stop for some of these guys, and he brought up, I thought it was a perfect example, is Bo Nix. Bo Nix was everything Auburn. He was, from the time he was 6 years old and daddy saw that he could throw the football, he was going to be a quarterback at Auburn one day. And the weight of the world on that was maybe too much for Bo Nix to bear. Plus, he didn't have great teams around him, whatever. He leaves, he goes to Oregon, he flourishes, right? And so I think that those kind of things can happen. And maybe that is one area where if you're thinking about Graham Mertz, maybe now with, quote, and there's always pressure, but, being away from Wisconsin, having a second chance, there's not a ton of expectation here. Maybe Graham Mertz can flourish in his second spot.
Well, we've all said this, and that's a good analogy, but we've all said this. It's either one of two things or a combination. Look, the guy was a 4-star recruit that everybody wanted, and it was great when he got to Wisconsin, and then he fizzled. So, but he still started 32 games, and last year threw 19 touchdowns and 10 picks. So either he's a decent player that was just confined in a bad offense, or he's not that good a player, and that's why he was available. It's one of the two.
Right.
And usually you can say it's a combination of the two, but it's going to lean one way than the other. I'll say this. I really liked the mic'd up. Did you see the mic'd up with Mertz this week?
Yeah.
I really liked it. Two things. Number one, Florida wants to send the message that they got the right guy, or they wouldn't have distributed it, right? But I liked what I heard. He's funny. He's one of the guys. He's putting up with the guys. He seemed loose and laid back. And again, that's one of the reasons they released it to all of us, so we could kind of get to know him and feel connected to him. But I liked what I think he is. He's an older guy that likes to cut up with the younger guys. Look, it's not going to be too big for him. Then he started 32 games in the Big Ten. Okay, he's played at the Big House and at the Horseshoe and Happy Valley. And he played home games at Wisconsin, where Camp Randall. Those places are packed, man.
Right.
This guy's played a lot of games in front of 80, 90, and 100,000 fans. So the moment's not going to be too big for him. It's just, is he good enough? And we'll find in 2 nights. We'll start finding that out.
Yeah, as we disembark and get ready for Thursday in Utah, one thought about the schedule, and I was thinking about this. I look at the first 6 games, right, and there's 3 wins in there. All right, there's 3 that they'll absolutely win. The teams that they're playing, and then they have Utah, Kentucky, and Tennessee. Right, win one of those, and you're 4-2. Win 2 of those, and you're 5-1. Again, 3-3, worst case scenario. Florida has to get back to the point where they can beat Tennessee in the swamp, or go up to Kentucky and find a way to win, or upset Utah, which they did a year ago. What do you think about those first 6 games, Frank?
Yeah, I hear you, Dan. And I think forget Kentucky for a minute. The 2 gigantic games are Utah and Tennessee. Just give me a split. Yeah. If you could give me a split right now, they're going to win game 2 and game 4 because they're easy games, right? So if you could give me a split, then the first third of the season you're 3-1. You know what? I'll take that. I'll take 3-1 to start the season, because then I think you've gained some confidence. What you said is right, and I've been saying this too. Step 1 is Florida's got to get back to where they beat Kentucky and Missouri and Vanderbilt and South Carolina every year, every time.
Right.
That when Florida's at its best, or when Florida's where it should be, you win those games.
Right.
Maybe Tennessee and Georgia and LSU, you don't every year, but Missouri and Vanderbilt, Kentucky and South Carolina, you got to beat them every time you play. And so can Florida get closer to that? But to your question, the Kentucky game, I'll worry about that. I think the two big games in the first four, Dan, are at Utah and at Tennessee and home against Tennessee. And by the way, I think they can win both those games.
Yeah.
They're a 6-point dog in this game. I know part of that's because they don't know if Cam Rising's playing, but they're not a 26-point dog. They're a 6-point dog. All right.
Right.
At home against Tennessee right now, if they played, they'd be what, a home dog by 4, maybe, give or take.
Give or take, not much more than that. I mean, I would think less, but yeah, I would.
Yes. So you're probably right. So if you're a 6-point underdog on the road and a 3-point underdog at home,
you can win one of
those games.
Yeah,
and those games are critical. So let me ask you this: who, apart from Mertz, give me 3 or 4 guys you think are really critical guys this week to get you.
Well, I think. Oh, for the Utah game.
For this game.
The thing that bothered me about Utah last year, in the second half, they came out and they ran it down our throats.
Right.
So give me your boys up front. And give me your boys up front and let me look at this Florida defense. And I've always said this about the Gator defense, and we've been watching them a long time. And I usually can tell, and you can tell, you watch that Gator defense, they get to the line of scrimmage and they get hit. That's when you know you got a good Florida defense on the ground game. And so I think that if those guys can take away the run, whether it's Rising or whomever, it's going to be a challenging night at least. Make it tough for Utah. Don't let their big backs rip off 6, 8, 14-yard runs. Don't let them convert 3rd and 8 in a draw play. Those plays are the ones that make me nuts. So that's number one. Who's going to catch the ball? Can one of the freshman kids go into that environment and stand out? They rave about the Wilson kid. They like the Gene kid speed. Can one of those young guys go in there and make some ball plays? That would be one thing we never really saw, and I have not seen them practice personally. The one thing we never see is the Mertz. Oh, look at this beautiful 25, 30-yard throw down the field. Right. So that's what I'm looking for, I think.
I think you've hit it. If you ask me the 4 most important guys, I would say just what you said. The 4 most important guys. 3 of them are defensive linemen.
Yeah.
Cam Jackson, Caleb Banks, and Princely.
Yeah.
And I say Princely because I still can't pronounce his last name. But
UM.
For me, okay, but those are the 3 most, because if Princely can pressure the pocket a little bit, I think losing Justice Bone's a big deal, but I think he's a good player. I think that would hurt. Yeah. But I think Princely can collapse the pocket. The 2 big tackles keep you from running crazy, and then Mertz has to play well. So those are the 4. So the 4 most important guys for me: Cam Jackson, Caleb Banks, Princely, and on offense, Mertz. They're the most important. If those guys are good, you have a chance. But I'm excited about Eugene Wilson.
Yeah,
you've seen his tape even before he got there.
Yeah,
he is one of the. They don't come along very often. Those
right.
Percy Harvin. I'm not saying he's Percy Harvin, but those quick feet, lightning quick, change direction type players that you watch Peter Warwick do it. You watch Percy Harvin do it. And again, I'm not saying he's as good as those guys. Who knows how good he'll be? But he's that style of player, that stop, start, change direction guy, that real twitchy guy. So I'm really excited. And he's number 3. So look for number 3. And look, if everything else we said is good, those 2 running backs are good. I'm sorry they lost Cam Carroll because I heard he was a pretty good back and a good third back. But those 2 running backs are pretty good. That. Ricky Pearsall is pretty good. Jason Marshall is not going to get beat left and right. So, there's some players out there. They have to be good at the honest. You're right. Utah can't run all over them. But you think Rising plays? What do you think?
I think he gives it a go, but, it was odd with Whittingham this week not confirming that to me. That was a little bit interesting.
By now, my thought, I said all along that he'll brace it up and try.
Right.
I said that. I've been saying that since springtime.
Right.
He's got to brace it up and try. But now, the fact that they haven't said he's going to brace it up and try.
That's interesting.
I'm starting to think he may not play.
I know.
Part of it might be run him out there and the place goes crazy,
Right.
That may be part of the psychological game, which I get. The sideline goes crazy, the place goes crazy because he's out there. But I'm starting to think now he may not play. You got to believe if he was cleared by now, we'd know it, right?
Yeah.
Unless it's a psychological ploy of some sort, because Florida's planning on him playing. You know that. I mean, any good defensive coach plans for the star to be out there. So Dan, how do you see the game? How do you see the game play? What are your expectations?
I'm a negative guy here on this one. I think Utah's a tough place to play. They've won 14 in a row. They got revenge factor in their back pocket. They, regardless of who plays, I just don't know. In my mind, Frank, the last time I saw my Gators play, it was a debacle. And so was the one before that and the one before that. It was Vandy, FSU, and bowl game. So I need to see it, and then I hope I can believe it. And I think they'll be better. I just don't know that they're going to win this opener out there.
I'm kind of right with you. I'd like to go against you. But here's what I think. And I'm going to say this on my radio show, which I haven't yet.
Okay.
I think Utah's going to win the game. Okay. It's a hard place to play. It is a good stadium. They just won the Rose Bowl. They've got a good program. The guy's a really good coach.
Right.
But I think the game's going to end. I'm not in the moral victory world. I'm not trying to say that, but I'm trying to say what I really think. I think the game's going to be over. Utah will have won, but people will have a better impression of Florida than they had before the game. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense.
I think it's that game. I think Utah's going to win the game. But I think people will feel, and that sounds like I'm saying moral victory. I'm not trying to say moral victory.
Yeah, I hear you.
What I'm trying to say is there's a way people look at your team. That's just how it is.
Yeah.
And I think people will look at Florida differently than they did before the game.
But it does the Gators no good if they can't build off of that. Remember, we go back to last year, and we had a highly different look at the Florida Gators after that first win over Utah. So we would be remiss if we didn't. I don't want to unpack it because I could talk forever, but I haven't talked to you about Swamp Kings. And one of the things that I related it to, and that struck me, and this is where we need to get back to, I think, in Florida football, is after you watch the 05 season and you got a coach who's ready to put a bullet in his head when they go 9-3. Right. And if we go 9-3 today, there'll be a parade down University. So it's a little bit different look now, but I haven't asked you at all about it. So let me ask you, what did you think of Swamp Kings?
I did not like it. Okay. And I know diehard Gator fan did like it, but I did not like it. Part of it is I have a real connection in my heart to the 90s Gators. That's just me.
Yeah.
Spurrier and Werfel and Doring and Riedel and Ike and that's the Gators that I love all Gators, but that's the one I feel a connection to. Just me.
Yeah.
And I don't know. Number one, I expected there to be all this nefarious. Oh my God, I can't believe it happened stuff. Yeah. I thought it was not a cover up, but it was a puff piece for Urban, a puff piece for Tim, who I love. I love Tim Tebow, but I thought it was built for Urban and Tim and Brandon, and I thought it was a fun look back in a glorious time, but I didn't like it. I just felt like, and I felt like it was Urban Meyer Productions, and Urban approved all of it. And the story when Jarvis Moss blocked the kick, which was awesome. And we won the national title. We were all there. I was out there. You were out there. We were all in Arizona. We had the time of our lives. But when Urban told the story, he said, I had to beat the visor because the visor was the king. And we ran across the field and I shook Steve's hand and he said, hey, congratulations. Now go win it all. And I'll never forget that. I believe he said it. I don't think Urban was lying. And I believe Steve would say that. But it almost sent the message like we're now buddies. We're now joined at the hip. We're now in this together. And I just don't know that I feel like that's how it is. I think it misrepresented some emotions. So I didn't like it very much. How about you?
Course that thing through my veins, Frank. Hook me up to an IV. I absolutely loved it. I couldn't, as a Gator fan, it took me back to days gone by of when it all mattered, and when Brandon Spike said Brandon Sollers, I took Spikes into the swamp and it was empty, and I said, this is a special place, don't mess it up. Oh, Frank. I'm a sucker Gator fan, baby.
I get it. Yeah. I get it. No, I get it. I get it.
I loved every second of it. If I was Billy Napier, I would send that thing out to every recruit. This is what we're building back. This is where we're going to be. And I totally understand you from a journalistic standpoint. Puff piece. I dare I say I felt badly for Herbs. Yes, I did, Frank.
That's what they wanted. That was the goal.
Dare I say it's time to put him on the wall? in the up. Yes, I do, Frank. Say what you want. And do I think he lied in that thing? Hell yes, I do, Frank. But you know what? I do know that guy poured out his
I do
every
too.
fiber of his being for 5 years, maybe not 6, but for 5 years. And man, he's a psycho. He's a freaking psycho. And Tebow's a psycho midnight marauder with face paint on. And Frankie, I'll go watch it with you today, and I'll make it feel different.
Yeah. Hey, no, you know what? Honestly, Dan, I respect everything. I hear you, and I'm getting a little bit of chills hearing you say it. I get your point, and I think a lot of Florida fans that are watching this totally agree with you.
Yeah,
I get it. I get it. And look, it's hard to win national championships.
Yeah,
that son of a gun won 2 of them.
I know.
For us. He won our school with that helmet right behind me. He won 2 of them.
Yeah.
And Tim Tebow won 2 of them. And Tim Tebow brought one of the 3 Heismans back. Yeah. And I think Tim Tebow is one of the most genuinely good people that's ever come through Florida, that's ever come through college athletics. Yeah. I think he's legit. But the people that think Tebow's not legit are idiots. Yeah. He is legit, down to earth, really good man. And I'm so proud that he went to my school. But I don't know. It's just hard for me to say. It was hard to buy it. You know, that makes sense. It was just hard for me to buy it.
Yeah, I get it. We lived it. We saw it. We know what happened. There were a million other stories they could have unpacked. And like I said, I'm sure Herbs was like, yeah, I'll do the interview, but I ain't talking about bleep, 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 right? So,
right.
But yeah, Frankie, I'll admit it on this Gator podcast. There's a couple times I had tears in my eyes. Okay. I mean,
you're the greatest. That's why you're the greatest. Hey, as we wrap this, let me say this. Regardless of what happens this week, we'll do this. Obviously, we're back to doing it every week, folks. So look for All Things Gators every week. Right. I will say this. I love where we're headed. I don't know how many games they're going to win this year. Yeah. I think he's going to recruit a bunch of ballers. I think he's got a crazy defensive coordinator. I think defensive coordinators need to be a little bit crazy.
Oh, yeah.
I think there's more athletes than there's been. I think Mertz is going to be better than people think. I don't know how many. They're going to win 7 games this year, 8 games. We'll see. But I like the direction. I do. If I'm just Homer guy, then let me be Homer guy. I like the direction, man.
All right, my man. Well, good stuff as always. We'll talk to you next week, and hopefully about the 1-0 Gators. Tough task at Utah Thursday night, but hey, it's back. Enjoy it, and can't wait for Thursday.
All Things Gators, Dan Hicken and Frank Frangie. See y'all.